Welcome to Island Crimes and Mysteries. And now, it's time to join your host Nools for another episode.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you're a returning listener, I want to say a big thank you for your continued support. If this is your first time listening to my podcast, welcome. It's great to have you on board. Before I start today, guys, I just want to say thank you for all the lovely comments and all that I've been getting on my socials and on Apple and Spotify. But I just want to let you know, in case the people that have written to me on Apple and Spotify, why I'm not replying to you. There is no way for me to reply to you on there. But just to let you know, I have seen all your comments and I appreciate them, and people that have given me ideas for other episodes, I have seen them and thank you. I'll hopefully get around to them all in due course. So just be patient with me and we'll get to them all at some stage. Alright, so let's get on with today's story. Please be advised that the story I'm about to tell may be upsetting to some listeners. 13-year-old Philip Cairns vanished after leaving his home in Ballyrone, South Dublin, to return to school after his lunch break on the 23rd of October 1986. Despite extensive searches and a massive media campaign, no trace of Philip has ever been found since that day. So what happened to Philip? How could he just vanish without a trace? Let's take a look.
This afternoon's big search for 13-year-old Philip Cairns was a community's response to his disappearance. However, despite the hundreds of hours that have gone into the search so far over the past 17 days, the Gardaí are still baffled by his disappearance.
Born on the 1st of September 1973, Philip was one of 6 children, having 4 older sisters named Mary, Sandra, Suzanne and Helen, and 1 younger brother named Owen, whom he shared a bedroom with and was very close to. His mother was a stay-at-home mum, while his father worked for the Nestle company. The Cairns lived a comfortable life and the children wanted for nothing. Philip was described by those who knew him as a shy and retiring boy, with an innocent look about him, who was well behaved, giving his parents absolutely no trouble. One of his sisters describing him as a kind boy who got along with everyone. He was into sports, hurling and football being his favourite, which he enjoyed playing with his younger brother Owen, while also having a keen interest in angling, having won trophies for his angling skills over the years. He had actually only returned from a fishing trip with his dad the previous weekend, prior to his disappearance. Philip had arrived home for his lunch that day, leaving his school, Coláiste Éine, at around 1:15, and while eating his sandwich, finished some of his homework that he had to have done for his afternoon classes. He then left his house at around 1:20 p.m. and started the 10-minute walk back to school. But he never made it back there that afternoon. Philip was in first year in Coláiste Éine and was in his 7th week of the new school year when he disappeared. His mother saying he was very happy there and had settled in well. He was a boy who liked routine and would come home for his hour-long lunch break every day. His father saying his routine was so rigorous that you could literally set your clock by him. That day, after eating his sandwich while finishing some of his maths homework, according to his grandmother May, who lived with the Cairns family, he set off back to school. His sister Helen was off school that day with a toothache, and her mother had planned to take her to the dentist as the toothache was getting worse. His other sister Suzanne was also at home that day, as she would have to mind her grandmother while Alice brought Helen to the dentist. Philip had offered to mind his grandmother, but his mother decided that it would be better for Suzanne to stay, as she was a bit older at the age of 15. Amid the busyness of the house, Philip had organised what books he needed for his afternoon classes, which would have been religion, maths and geography. The family noted nothing unusual about the day and said that as he put his bag over his shoulder to head back to school, he shouted out, "Cheerio, Gran, I'm off," as he walked out the door. Nobody actually saw him leave the house. It would have been normal procedure for his mother to stand at the door and watch him walk up the road until he disappeared out of sight. But on this particular day, she was preoccupied with preparing to take Helen to the dentist. When he didn't return to school, the school just assumed he had taken ill or some sort of family emergency had happened, as he had never missed a day up till then. When his dad arrived home from work at 5, Philip was still not home. He was usually home by 4:15 every day. But they weren't anxious at this stage and assumed he had stayed back playing with some of his new friends. No cause for concern. The real panic set in when his mother Alice and sister Helen arrived back from the dentist and Philip still was not home. After checking with his siblings and they had not seen him, Alice began to worry. This was not a case of a child just staying back to play with his friends. She had a bad feeling about it. Philip was not just one to stay out on a whim. She decided it was time to check with Philip's friends to see if any of them had seen him. First, she checked with his friend Dean. Philip had made arrangements to call in to Dean on his way back to school and the two of them would walk back together. But it turned out that he'd never showed up to collect him. Next stop was his friend Enda to see if he was there, but Enda said he hadn't seen Philip either. It would become clear after chatting with all his close friends that none of them had seen Philip at all that afternoon. In fact, he had never even made it back to school for his afternoon classes. This is when the real panic began to set in for Alice, the rest of the family, friends and neighbours. Enda's father was a Garda and he made the call at 6:30 p.m. to Rathfarnham Garda station to report Philip missing. The Gardaí swung into action immediately and within a few hours a massive search was underway for the missing teenager. It was October, the nights crept in early, the weather was cold. It was not the environment for a young boy to be out in alone. Most importantly, it was totally out of character for Philip to do this. His mother said that when Philip left the house that day, he fully intended on returning to school. He wasn't the type to wander off or talk to strangers. She said he loved being with his family and would always come home from school on time. As I said from the start, a full-scale search was in operation. Gardaí were called in from other nearby stations to help and a full alert was put out to be on the lookout for Philip. It was very quickly ruled out that Philip was a runaway. Besides, the obvious fact, it was not in his nature. He was a happy boy, he loved his family and was well settled in his new school. He also had £40 in savings in the building society, which had not been withdrawn, which to the Gardaí was another indicator that he was not a runaway. Where would he go and what would he survive on with no money? In the early days of the investigation, the first credible lead came in the form of a potential sighting of Philip. This came from a woman who stated she had picked up a young boy who fitted Philip's description in Kilshahan, County Tipperary. The woman said the young boy said he was from Waterford and had been staying in a guest house. She doubted this story, stating that the boy looked as if he had been sleeping rough. Anticipation quickly turned to disappointment when the young boy was found and it turned out not to be Philip. A few days after Philip's disappearance, his father made an impassioned appeal to the public for any information leading to Philip's safe return. He said the family were devastated, saying that all they could do was sit and wait and pray that they would receive a call to say Philip was found safe and well. The now iconic photo of Philip from his confirmation day had been distributed nationwide on TV, newspapers and shop windows in the hope that someone would remember something when they saw it. His mother appealed directly to Philip in a desperate attempt for a reply, telling Philip to come home and not to worry about anything. She said all they wanted was for him to come home. These appeals continued as the family's desperation increased with each passing day, and the Gardaí hit dead end after dead end. Families in the area where Philip had disappeared from became increasingly worried for the safety of their own children, as it was so unusual for a teenage boy to just vanish in broad daylight on a busy road on his way back to school. The fact that there was no confirmed sighting of Philip walking back to school that day on this busy road added to the anxieties of parents and the Gardaí alike, as people feared there was a child abductor on the loose in the area. People could not get their head around the fact that no one had seen or heard anything. Surely if Philip had been dragged into a vehicle from the footpath, he would have put up some sort of a fight and struggled to get away, kicking and screaming. There is no doubt that this would have been witnessed by someone. As I said, it was a busy road. It was in a built-up area. At this time of day, there would have been always lots of vehicles and people milling about. Plus, other children would have been walking this road back to school at exactly the same time. So to even attempt an abduction was an audacious act in itself. If someone did witness his abduction, they weren't coming forward. Maybe a child walking back to school had seen something but was too scared to come forward. Gardaí then wondered, had Philip taken a lift from someone that he knew? Had he willingly got into a car? Hence why no one had seen an altercation or an abduction taking place. Despite nothing to go on, the team of 25 detectives continued their search for Philip, who was last seen leaving his house in his school uniform, wearing a grey jacket with black squares and black leather shoes. They searched local woods, wasteland, derelict houses, conducted house-to-house searches in the hope Philip was either hiding out in someone else's house or was being held captive in a house. As Hurricane Charlie passed over the country, causing some disruption to searches, rivers were dredged and manholes searched by the local county council. Another credible tip came in from some forestry workers in County Wicklow, who said they had seen some young lads, one fitting Philip's description, hanging out in a shack near a local wood. This too was investigated, but turned out to be another dead end. The fact that Philip had basically vanished and no leads whatsoever were taking them anywhere was leading Gardaí to believe that Philip had actually been kidnapped. It seemed like the only likely scenario. Detective Inspector Jerry O'Carroll, who had worked on the case, would later say that every resource was put into it from the very beginning. No stone was left unturned. He stated it was one of the largest manhunts in his career. Every house within a 3-mile radius of where Philip had went missing had been searched. Every department within the Gardaí had been used. They even set up a roadblock on Ballyrone Road to observe how busy it was at the time of Philip's disappearance. And as expected, the road at 1:30 on a school day had some 147 cars pass. 14 pedestrians, including 5 schoolboys, were observed, as well as cyclists. The chances of an abduction taking place without one single eyewitness was practically impossible. A few people had come forward saying that they had seen some vehicles acting suspiciously in the area that day. One man had come forward saying that as he headed to the airport, he noted a car, which he said was either a red Mazda or a Renault, acting suspiciously. He said it was parked in a way that was causing an obstruction on Ballyrone Road. He had taken down the registration plate number on a slip of paper and left it in his car. Unfortunately, on his return and on hearing about Philip, he went out to look for it in the car. His wife had cleaned out the vehicle while he was away and the slip of paper was gone forever. He said that he had seen a young boy with the Coláiste Éine school uniform who looked very much like Philip approach the passenger door like he was about to get into the car. He said the driver looked like a man in his 50s with grey hair. The fact that this man had taken down the reg number and it had subsequently been lost was really frustrating for the Gardaí. In an attempt to help the man remember, they sent him for hypnosis, but this did not help. The man was not able to recall the number. On the 29th of October, Gardaí conducted a series of interviews with Philip's teachers and classmates in the hope that someone would have some information. They would later say that these interviews had been worthwhile. One friend of Philip's, who sat beside him in school, said that on the day he disappeared, he didn't notice anything different about Philip. He said he went on his break and just never came back. Then later that day, not long after Gardaí had finished their interviews, a big breakthrough in the form of Philip's school bag. It was found at approximately 7:45 p.m. in a laneway approximately half a mile from Philip's house by 2 18-year-old teenagers. The bag was faded and frayed, with Philip's name a little faded but nonetheless evident on the front of the bag in black marker. The laneway where the bag was found was approximately 100 yards in length and was a popular shortcut for locals between Andevlin Road and Andevlin Drive. One of the girls said that they had walked through the laneway a few times earlier that day, but there was no sign of any bag when they did. This bag had only been placed there very recently. After finding the bag, the girls took it up to Rathfarnham Garda station. The bag was bone dry despite the fact it had been raining heavy all that day. This became another enduring mystery. How had the bag suddenly appeared in the laneway, despite the fact, again, it was a busy walk through, the bag was dry, and it was not there during daylight hours. In fact, the bag was never there during all the searches that had been conducted. Plus, the place was still also crawling with Gardaí, so it was a chance to take returning to the area to leave the bag. It was surmised that whoever placed the bag in the laneway did so when the sun went down. But why? It didn't go unnoticed either that the bag reappeared the same day as the interviews at the school had been conducted. Coincidence? It was forensically examined and fingerprints were taken from it. It had been suggested at the time to fingerprint all the pupils at Philip's school. Maybe whoever had left it there had been coerced by their abductor and was afraid to come forward. This could be a way to seek them out. But this would have been a mammoth task for the Gardaí, and that was not an option. The question still remained, who left the bag there? Was it his abductor or someone who had just happened to find it but did not want to be drawn into the investigation? An appeal was made to the public at the time by Superintendent Frank Hanlon. He reiterated that they only wanted to speak to whoever had left it there, that they were not in trouble. All they wanted to do was clear up the question of the bag. He urged them to get in touch. On the 1st of November, a call came into the station from someone stating that he had seen a man walking in the area on the day the bag had been discovered, with a similar bag to Philip's on his back. The caller did not reveal himself to the Gardaí and never came forward after that, and never gave any contact details despite pleas from the Gardaí. It was decided that this call was more than likely a hoax. As the school midterm break came to an end, Philip's school reopened on Monday the 5th of November, and one seat remained glaringly empty in the classroom. The Gardaí then interviewed pupils from two other local schools, Sancta Maria School and Mercy Convent. A lot of the pupils from these schools travelled the same route as Philip and shared two shortcuts. Despite interviewing more than 800 pupils, no new leads were forthcoming. But Gardaí had a new line of inquiry to follow up after their interviews with the teachers and students. There were claims made that Philip had been subjected to bullying at the school by pupils in classes above him. But after digging deeper, this line of inquiry, like all the rest, led nowhere, only adding to the Gardaí's frustration and the anxiety and worry of the family. A special mass was held at the local church by the principal of Philip's school to show solidarity with the Cairns family, who were suffering so much in the wake of his disappearance. Despite his sisters having returned to school, his younger brother Owen, whom Philip was so close to, was too upset to go back. Over the course of the investigation, several leads that led nowhere came in. The weekend after Philip went missing, a company in Tala received a call, which went to their answering machine. A young boy left a message saying, "I am Philip Cairns. I ran away from home. I can't go home. Tell my family I'm sorry. Thank you." Gardaí, on examining the message, decided the boy talking sounded older than Philip, 15 or 16 years old, and they were confident it was another hoax call. In addition to this, Philip's family were receiving calls that only had silence on the other end of the line. Sometimes sobbing could be heard. One call made to the family had a boy crying in the background. Cruel and unnecessary torment for a family already suffering unimaginable grief and loss. These hoax calls to the family would go on for years, tormenting them. What kind of sick individuals would think this was funny? As every lead was turning out to be a dead end, the Gardaí decided to do a reconstruction in a bid to try and jog people's memories of that day. So on the 4th of November, a boy of similar height and build, wearing the same school uniform as Philip had been wearing on the day and carrying a similar bag, retraced Philip's movements that he had made on the 23rd of October. It was a very emotional day for Philip's family as the young boy left their house and set off on the same journey as Philip had. His mother Alice again pleading with whoever had Philip to just release him, saying that she held nothing against them. She surmised that maybe they felt that they couldn't release him, but she reiterated that revenge is not going to help. They just wanted him home. She urged them to pray for the strength to do the right thing, saying, "The Lord will guide you." The reconstruction was aired on RTE's Evening Extra programme, and Gardaí again were inundated with calls, but yet again none of these calls amounted to anything. Then, on the 6th of November, another tragedy would befall the area. Brendan Houlihan, a 26-year-old church sacristan at the St Columba's Church in Glasnevin, had been asked by the parish priest to look up Philip's baptismal certificate. He was fulfilling that duty when he was brutally murdered. His body would later be found in the Royal Canal in Dublin. He was only partially clothed, with just his underwear and socks on, with some of his shirt stuffed into his mouth. He had been reported missing by his parents, who were concerned when he hadn't come home. He had seemingly locked up the church at 9 p.m. and was en route to the priest's house to deliver church letters when he was set upon. These letters were found floating in the canal near his body. But his murderers would later be caught and sentenced for the crime. It just turned out to be a coincidence that he was looking up Philip's baptismal cert at the time and was not related to Philip's case in any other way. Gardaí widened the search for Philip, and on the 10th of November, some 300 people, which included Philip's family and friends, began searching for the boy in and around the Dublin mountains. Nothing of significance was found. After volunteers printed off over 2,000 missing posters, they were distributed countrywide and could be seen in every post office in the country. Everyone, unless you were living under a rock, knew about Philip Cairns at this stage. But still no credible leads, despite potential sightings in Tipperary, Waterford, parts of Dublin inner city, as well as alleged sightings in Wales, London and mainland Europe. Interpol then became involved in the search, as all leads in Ireland were going nowhere. His family were still convinced that he had been abducted. His father saying Philip would not under any circumstances get into the car with a stranger. He wondered, was there another child or teenager in the car already that would have put Philip at ease, making it easy for the abductor to coerce him into getting into the vehicle. Detective Inspector Jerry O'Carroll agreed with Philip's father's theory, going as far as to say he would not rule out the abductor being someone known to the family, that Philip would have had no concerns about getting into the car with. He believed this person would have known Philip's routine, that he left his home to walk to school at 1:30. Maybe they pulled up under the guise of offering Philip a lift back to school. He highly doubts this was a random abduction. Convinced there would have been a struggle, and this would have been witnessed by people on the busy street. It also backs up the story of the man on his way to the airport who took down the reg number. He said that the boy he had seen had willingly walked over to the passenger side of the car. Detective O'Carroll is convinced that one of the many locals, over 1,500, that were interviewed after his disappearance is more than likely the culprit. Despite having retired, Detective O'Carroll has never forgotten about Philip and has even conducted unofficial searches when he has got a tip over the years. But Philip's whereabouts still remain elusive. As time passed by and there was no sign of Philip, Gardaí began to believe that hope of finding him alive was diminishing. But his family never gave up hope, saying hope was all that was keeping them going. Christmas came and went that year with no word of Philip. Then, on the 21st of January, a 12-hour vigil was held at the Church of the Holy Spirit, with his parents and siblings in attendance, as well as hundreds of locals. The parish priest paid tribute to Philip's family and their strength in such adversity. His brother Owen served as an altar boy at the vigil. The family were very humbled by the large turnout, and especially all the young people that had attended. Over the years, many different theories and possible scenarios were explored, from the theory that Philip knew his abductor and willingly got into the car, to the possibility he was taken by a paedophile and possibly killed to silence him. One such individual whose name began to be spoken about when it came to Philip's disappearance was a man named Eamon Cook. He was the owner of a pirate radio station named Radio Dublin, which had originally been founded in 1966 and later taken over by Cook in 1977. And from that point, the pirate station started to go into decline, eventually closing down in May 2003 after Cook was convicted of child sex offences which had taken place at the radio station. It had been the first radio station in Ireland to do a 24-hour broadcast during the Irish general election of 1977. The station had been raided several times over the years and equipment seized, but Cook was only ever convicted for broadcasting offences once and was on this occasion fined £35. He had several convictions to his name spanning decades, from 5 years of penal servitude in 1957 for shooting at Gardaí during an attempted robbery at a petrol station near Bray, to his first trial in 2003 for sexual offences, where he was convicted of the attempted rape and indecent assault of 4 girls. This conviction was later quashed on a technicality and he was released in 2006. He would go on trial again in 2007, where he pleaded not guilty to 42 charges covering the mid to late 1970s. He was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He appealed his sentence in 2015, but it was denied. In 2016, he was granted temporary release to a hospice due to deteriorating health, where he died in June 2016. In May of that year, a woman had contacted the Gardaí with what they believed to be very credible information about Cook regarding the Philip Cairns case. She had initially come forward in 2011, but the information she provided at the time was deemed too vague by the investigating officers. When she went to make her written statement on that occasion, she fainted at the very mention of Eamon Cook's name. Such was her fear of the man. By 2016, the woman in question, who herself had been abused by Cook when she was only 9 years of age, felt strong enough to come forward and make her statement in relation to the Philip Cairns case. In this written statement, she said that Eamon Cook had collected her from school in a wine-coloured car and that she was under the impression he was taking her to the radio station. But, she continues, as they drove, he suddenly swerved and came to a stop as they passed a bus stop, and there he was, this young teenage boy. She said the boy said hello to Eamon Cook. She said he was wearing a grey jumper and had black hair and was around 13 years old. Cook told him to hop in and he would show him around the radio station. When they arrived at the station, Cook looked up and down the road before leaving them out of the car. When the boy asked him why he had done this, he said he didn't want to get caught having them at the station. The woman remembers the boy saying to her, "That man," as in Cook, "was sick in the head calling you his girlfriend." She said Cook then opened the door and asked the boy for a word in private. The boy and Cook then went into a room that had a glass door, and Eamon started pushing the boy and the boy pushed back. She said Eamon then proceeded to put his hands around the boy's neck before striking him across the left temple with a trophy as he said, "Do you think I'm stupid?" When she saw the boy lying on the floor, motionless, bleeding from the head, she made a run for it. She thinks she passed out then, as she remembers nothing after that, before waking up in Cook's car to Eamon Cook telling her she was lucky she got out before the radio staff arrived. She said she never saw the boy again, nor did Eamon Cook ever mention it again. She believed the boy was Philip Cairns, and she also believed Eamon Cook was going to murder her after what she had witnessed. And consequently, every time after that she saw Eamon Cook, she would have a panic attack. She went on to say that Cook had organised 2 schoolgirls to plant Philip's school bag in the laneway, stating she was in the car when he stopped and the 2 schoolgirls approached the window. He told her to pick up a bag that was in the footwell. He opened the bag and took out a grey school bag. She said it was the one she had seen the boy with. She went on to say that when she saw the bag, she went into shock, as she knew it was bad if he still had possession of it. He handed the bag to the girls. Cook then brought her for lunch and then went back to his house. The two girls arrived back shortly after this. Cook never mentioned the incident to her again. Gardaí went to interview Eamon Cook on the 21st of May 2016, following the woman's statement, which they thought sounded credible. At this stage, he was in St Francis Hospice in Raheny, Dublin. He was terminally ill with lung cancer and suffering from dementia and nearing the end of his life. As they questioned him, he confessed to having met Philip and said he had been to Cook's house and to the radio station. But he denied having had anything to do with the school bag being dropped in the laneway. The Gardaí went back the following day to interview him again, and he stated again that he had met Philip and Philip had been to his house and visited the radio station on his own, but he denied having anything to do with the school bag. This was the first time Eamon Cook had been linked to Philip Cairns in all the years of investigating his disappearance. But this line of inquiry suffered a setback when it was established by Gardaí that the woman who gave the statement said that she had first met Cook in the summer of 1986 at his house in Heatherview Avenue in Tala. It also turned out that he had lied about Philip being at his house in Heatherview. As it turned out, he had not bought this house until 1987. He had been living in a different part of Tala in 1986. So the timeline of this woman's statement and Cook's statement don't match the dates. Adding to that, he never confessed to killing Philip or reveal any locations where Philip could have been buried. Cook passed away in June of 2016, taking any credible information to the grave with him, if he possessed any. After he died, Gardaí seized over 2,000 items belonging to Cook. Amongst his belongings was a note in his handwriting that said, "Everything we do is to establish the truth. Everything we do is designed to establish the truth. Philip Cairns, Kearns, Cairns." This was one of many notes found in boxes belonging to the convicted paedophile by Gardaí, who were trying to establish if he had made any admissions about Philip that could be amongst his personal effects. In another note, he refers to Philip as being "my son Philip." Cook did not have any biological son named Philip, so this entry is a bit strange. He goes on to write, October 1986, Philip Cairns. Although these notes don't incriminate him, they are certainly bizarre. If anything, it just shows a morbid obsession with the case. The evidence showed he had this obsession with a lot of missing children cases and murders, including Madeleine McCann, as well as the Holly Wells, Jessica Chapman murders in the UK. He kept scrapbooks with news articles of these cases, which also included the Graham Dwyer case, and he was obsessed with keeping notes and articles and stories in relation to clerical sex abuse in Ireland. But at the end of the day, there is nothing concrete to tie him to Philip Cairns, and it appears these notes are just ramblings. Gardaí also tested his DNA against DNA found on Philip's school bag, but it was not a match to Eamon Cook. He does, however, remain a person of interest in the case. Despite the passing of time, the case remains open and still a missing persons case, even though the view of many is that Philip was unfortunately most likely abducted and killed. For the Cairns family, losing Philip and not knowing what happened to him has been a harrowing experience. Despite all the false leads, hoax calls and dashed hopes over the years, they have never given up hope of finding Philip, but do fear the worst has happened. Like all the families of missing people I have covered in this podcast, all they want at this point is to bring Philip home and give him a proper burial. The family wants somewhere for their now elderly mother Alice to be able to visit and give her peace.
If anybody knows anything about what happened to Philip, I'd ask you to please come forward. We don't know how much time any of us have left, and we would really like to be able to bring Philip home, give him a burial, and somewhere for my mother to go where she knows where he is.
Alice still lives in the family home on Ballyroan Road and lights a candle for him every night. And his sisters Sandra and Suzanne work with various missing children's organisations. Various people have come forward over the years offering cash rewards for any information leading to the apprehension and conviction of whoever may have taken Philip. One man who had a lottery win of £250,000 put forward a reward of £20,000 in January 1995. He said he always had a fascination with the case and had been studying it for over 3 years and felt he had put all the pieces together but just needed that final piece of the jigsaw. Philip's father welcomed this donation, but unfortunately nothing came of it, as the man in question in July 1995 was involved in a serious car crash on the Navan Road, resulting in the death of his wife and him and his daughter being seriously injured. In October 2021, 35 years after Philip's disappearance, Gardaí used this significant anniversary to appeal again to the public for any information, saying in a statement, "Following the passage of time and changing circumstances, these people may now be in a position to assist us. There may be persons who were young at the time of Philip's disappearance and not in a position to provide An Garda Síochána with information, who may now be able to come forward. Even the smallest piece of information, which may seem insignificant, may assist the investigation." They reassured people that anyone who does ever come forward with information will be dealt with discreetly and sensitively. But as I said, despite all these pleas over the years, Philip's disappearance remains unsolved. Philip's father passed away in July 2014, having lived through every parent's worst nightmare with no answers. But the rest of the family carry on with an understated determination to one day get the truth. At the end of the day, they are the ones left grappling with his sudden and unexplained absence and have faced an unthinkable reality from which they can never really recover. The Cairns family were, after all, a regular Irish household who found themselves thrust into a nightmare conversely highlighted by media glare. Philip, like all other missing people, is not just a statistic. He is a beloved son, a cherished brother, and an integral part of a family that will forever bear the marks of his loss. Their courage is a firm reminder to us all that every missing persons case is at its core a human story with far-reaching ripples of sorrow and longing. Philip was described at the time of his disappearance as being of medium build, approximately 5'2" tall, weighing about 41 kilograms. He had dark hair and hazel-coloured eyes and a small birthmark under his chin. If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the Garda Confidential Helpline on 1800 666 111 or contact Crime Stoppers on 1-800 250 025, or you can ring the Garda station in Rathfarnham on 01 666 6500. So guys, that's it for today's episode of the Ireland Crimes and Mysteries podcast. Again, thanks for your listenership, and don't forget to subscribe to the show and hit that auto download so you never miss an episode. Until the next time, keep your eyes open and your mind curious. This podcast has been compiled from information gathered in the public sphere, like news articles, documentaries, and open source material that can be found on the web. Everything in this podcast is alleged unless a conviction has taken place.
You've been listening to Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. Join Newells for another episode, coming real soon. And keep up to date by following our social media sites, our YouTube channel, and our website, irelandcrimesandmysteries.ie.